Hey guys, it's Miss Springer. We're going to go ahead and get started with our lesson for today. It is September 15th and it's Tuesday. This is going to be lesson 2, and we're going to be working a little bit more with one-step equations, getting into two-step equations today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. All right. So over here, we've got our do now. So it says, get out your notebooks and pencils and begin working on the following problems. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on number 1. So first things first, when I'm working on solving for a missing variable in an equation, I'm going to go ahead and draw my wall down the middle, just so I remember to do every step on both sides. Next, I know I need to get this x isolated all by itself. So what I need to do is I need to take 1.2 away from both sides. And the reason I'm subtracting is because in order to get x by itself, I'm going to use the opposite operation. So in the lesson yesterday, I talked about the 4 basic operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So the opposite of addition is subtraction. So if you add something and then take it away, it cancels. So that's why we're canceling that 1.2. And then I'm going to rewrite. I'm going to have x, because I'm just bringing that x down. X equals, and then I've got 3 minus 1.2, which is going to give me 1.8. And I always like to box in my work just so we can stay nice and organized. When we get into 2 steps and multi-step equations, it's going to be a little bit more messy. So make sure that we are being nice and organized when showing our work. All right, over here on number 2, I'm going to go ahead and draw my wall. I've got y minus 55 equals 102. So something minus 55 equals 102. All right, well, I know I need to get y isolated all by itself. So I can go ahead and use the opposite of subtraction to get rid of that 55. So I can go ahead and add 55, because remember, subtraction and addition is going to cancel. So if I add 55 to both sides, that's going to cancel. I'm going to be left with, I'm going to bring down my y. So y equals, then 102 plus 55 is going to give me 157. And again, while you're going through these, make sure you're not totally just spacing out. Make sure you're actively writing these examples down, asking questions if you have questions. So 157 makes sense, because if I were to plug it back in for y, I would have 157 minus 55, and that should give me 102. All right. For the third one, excuse me, we've got 11d equals 33. Now, I told you guys that when you've got a coefficient in a variable, so that 11 is called a coefficient because it's right next to this variable d. So when you've got a coefficient right next to a variable, it's implied or assumed that they're being multiplied. So to explain it a little bit better, I'm going to write it out. So 11d equals 33. So I didn't do any math there. I just kind of rewrote the problem so I can paint a picture a little bit better. So 11d is the same thing as 11 times d. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that 11 by dividing both sides by 11. And the reason I'm dividing both sides by 11 is so that I can cancel that multiplication to the d. So want to get d all by itself, isolated. The opposite of multiplication is division. So whenever you see me use this bar on both sides, it means that I am dividing. So 11 divided by 11 cancels. I'm going to be left with d equals 33 divided by 11 is going to give me 30. Hey, Raul. I'm just going through today's lesson. You can go ahead and feel free to ask any questions as I'm going through these. So I'm on number 4 right now. So go ahead and get out your notebook and your calculator along with a pencil. All right, so number 4, I've got 12d equals 1,000. So what I'm gonna do is draw my wall. So I know that I draw my wall because I wanna do each step to both sides. So I've got 12D equals 1000. So again, when I've got a coefficient and a variable next to each other, so that number in front of the variable, when they're just smushed right against each other, I'm gonna go ahead and rewrite it for you guys just until we get used to this. So 12D is the same thing as 12 times D. So I can go ahead and undo that, that multiplication by dividing both sides by 12 to get D by itself. So I'm gonna go ahead and rewrite my D, and then I've got 1000 divided by 12. Now people always panic when they get decimals, but as long as be confident in yourself, as long as you know the steps, it's okay to get decimals, and you'll get decimals sometimes. Don't be afraid if it's not a nice, pretty number. So we've got 83.33333, but to indicate that it's repeating, I'm just gonna put a little bar over it so I know that it's repeating. And then on a quiz or anything, if you guys were to, if you guys were to just write 83.3, you guys would get full credit, so that'd be totally fine. All right, so we're gonna go over a little bit more one-step practice. We've got n divided by 6 equals -12. So something divided by 6 equals -12. So I see this bar right here. That represents division. So again, I want to get n isolated all by itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides by 6. And the reason I'm doing that is to get n all by itself by doing the opposite operation. So times 6 divided by 6, that's going to cancel. So I'm going to be left with n equals, and then -12 times 6. Remember, guys, when we're entering our calculators, remember that negative button is next to, the decimal point. So enter in -12 times 6, and you should get -72. And remember, a negative times a positive should give us a negative answer. All right. Again, stop me if you have any questions. We'll go the full class time. I'll stay on to make sure you guys don't have any questions. And if you do, I'll answer them. For this one, I've got -10 equals 2D. So I know that 2D is the same thing as 2 times D. So I'm just going to rewrite this until we get used to it. So 2 times D equals -10. Now this equation is a little different than what we're used to seeing because the variable is on the right side, but it's still the same concept, still the same skill. We need to get D isolated by itself. So to undo this multiplication right here, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. That's going to cancel. I'm going to bring my variable down. So D equals -10 divided by 2. Again, make sure you know where that negative button is on your calculator. It's right next to the decimal point. So you would enter -10 divided by 2, and you should get, maybe you can see it, -5 right there. It's -5. So make sure your guys are getting comfortable using your calculators, asking questions if you have questions. And then I did want to go over a fraction problem just because you will see those in the future. Maybe not on a quiz this week or anything, but you will see fractions in the future. So typically, like I said, when we have a coefficient next to a variable, they're being multiplied. So this is the same thing. This problem right here is the same thing as saying -1/2 times m equals -9. So I'm gonna scroll down so I have enough room. I'm gonna rewrite. I'm actually gonna click and move this over. I'll move it over here. So I've got -1/2 times m equals -9. Okay, so that's what's happening right there. I like to draw parentheses around my fractions just so I know that I just keep them nice and organized. But that's a personal thing, just to stay organized. So typically in this case, we would divide both sides of the equal sign by the coefficients. We would divide both sides by -1/2. But when you get to high school and college even, that notation is kind of funky. Seeing all of these fractions on top of each other being divided, it just looks messy and not good. So we're gonna, uh-oh, what did I do? There we go. We're going to go ahead and not use that notation. We're going to use something a little bit different. So I don't know if you guys remember in 6th grade learning keep, change, flip, but you guys talked about dividing fractions with keep, change, flip. So typically it would be something like -1/2 divided by -1/2. That's what you would see, which is what I was going to do, but that's just messy. That doesn't look nice, and it, like I said, when we wrote it out, it looks kind of messy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep, change, flip. And again, I'm showing you why the math works that you're using, because I think that's important to understand why it works. So I'm going to keep the first term, so -1/2. I'm going to change the sign to multiplication, and I'm going to flip the fraction. So I flipped -1/2 to -2/1. Okay, and then when we do that, we have -1 times -2, which gives us +2, and then 2 times 1 is 2. Well, that's just 2 divided by 2 is just 1. So that's why dividing by a fraction or multiplying by its reciprocal gives us 1. So that word that I used, it's not necessarily crucial for right now, but I'm just writing it out for you. So that's reciprocal. So that's when we multiply by that flipped fraction like we did here. So here, if we go back to our problem over here, instead of dividing both sides by -1/2 and making it all messy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply both sides by -2/1. And what I want to point something out to you guys. Isn't -2/1 the same thing as -2? Because anything divided by 1 is itself. So actually I can, whoops, meant to hit the erase button. So actually we're just multiplying both sides by -2. So again, that's going to cancel. We're going to have m equals -9 times -2, which gives me +18. And those are tricky. We're going to have a lot more practice with them. And I know that's a lot on the screen right now, but we're going to have a lot more practice, so don't panic with those. But as long as you guys are okay with these one-step equations moving forward, you should be good to go. So woohoo, if you guys are good with one-step equations, so we did those yesterday and then we did them today, you guys should be ready for two-step equations, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So this is an example. So if you are taking notes in your notebook, you can go ahead and write down two-step equations, because we're starting those today, and we're going to be working on those for the rest of the week, because they are essential for working on multi-step equations and for your understanding of algebra. So we've got 4k minus 2 equals 14. So something that is important to understand is I'm going to be using these two. What did I do? What did Miss Barner do? There we go. These two vocab words right here are really important to understand because I'm going to be using them a lot. So what I mean when I say constant. So a constant number is going to be one that does not have a variable attached to it. So -2 and 14 are constants in this equation. And then when I'm talking about a variable term, I'm talking about the term that has the variable in it, or the letter. So it's important to understand that when I'm talking about it, because when we're solving a two-step equation, our goal is to get all greens on one side, all yellows on the other side. So making sure that, let me get my highlighter back out. So we've got greens on one side, yellows on one side, and then we can solve for that missing variable. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So when looking at a variable term versus a constant term in a two-step equation, you're going to want to get rid of those constant terms first. So you're going to want to get, and not 4K, we're going to want to get rid of the constant first. So that term that says -2, so our first step is to add 2 to both sides. And we're doing this because eventually we want to get K by itself. And we want to combine constants before we can get to our variable term. So I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to bring down that 4K. So 4K, and then -2 plus 2 canceled. So I'm left with 14 plus 2, which gives me 16. All right. Now I know when a variable is next to a number like 4K, so that 4 is a constant, or a coefficient, I'm sorry. 4 is a coefficient and the K is a variable. So those are being multiplied. So 4K is the same thing as 4 times K. And I want to get, so I'm actually going to rewrite that for us just so we can get in the habit of thinking that way. So 4K is the same thing as 4 times K. And again, we want to get K all by itself isolated. So for step 2, I'm going to go ahead and undo that multiplication by dividing both sides by 4. All right. So K is going to equal 16 divided by 4, which is 4. So again, I wanted to get rid of that multiplication. I divided both sides by 4. I had 16 divided by 4, and then K was by itself, so I had K equals 4. And we're going to have lots and lots of practice with this, so don't worry. I'll keep going through practice problems. I'm going to write this one bigger over here. So I've got -1 plus x over 6 equals -2. All right. So I'll give you a second to get that one written down. All right. So first things first, I'm just identifying my constants so that you guys can see what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a constant versus a variable term. So again, my constants are the ones that don't have a variable attached to it. My variable terms are the ones that have a variable in them. So that x divided by 6 has the variable in it, so we're going to save that for last. That constant term, we're going to start working on moving this over here to the right side. So we want to start getting x by itself. So step 1, this is a -1 or a -1. So as far as a term goes, it's a -1. So I'm gonna add 1 to both sides of the equal sign. And I'm doing that so I can cancel that 1. So -1 plus 1, that's gonna cancel. I'm gonna rewrite x divided by 6 equals -2 plus 1 is -1. And again, make sure you're practicing typing these in your calculator. So if you typed in -2 plus 1, you're going to get -1. So just make sure that you're practicing typing them into your calculator. Okay. Now it's time for step 2. So step 2, we've got to get this x all by itself. Well, right now, that bar means division. So I need to do the opposite of division to get that x all by itself. And the opposite of division is multiplication. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides of the equal sign by 6. So that'll cancel. Again, my goal is to get x all by itself. So x equals -1 times 6, which gives me -6. All right. I'll leave that up there for a second so you guys can finish getting that written down. All right, I'm gonna go over some more two-step equations. Again, this is new stuff, so I don't want you guys to not have enough practice with it in case we wanna play a game or do a worksheet or something all together. I want you guys to make sure that you're nice and comfortable with these. So I'm gonna give you guys about a minute to get this first one written down and try and attempt solving it. So go ahead and take a minute. Look at this one. So it says negative k minus 5 equals 0. So it looks like a one-step equation, but it is a little tricky. So I'm going to give you a minute. Just try and start getting started on that one, and then we'll go over it together, and then ask me if you have any questions. All right, let's go over this one. So I've got negative k minus 5 equals 0. So I highlighted my constants. My constants are the terms that don't have the variable, and my variable term is highlighted in green. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get all of my yellows to the right side. So I want to save my constant term for last. So in order to cancel, so step one, in order to cancel that negative 5, I'm going to go ahead and add 5 to both sides of the equal sign in order to get rid of that on the left side. So I'm going to rewrite negative k equals 0 plus 5, which gives me 5. All right, now it looks like we're done because I've got k sort of by itself, but then I see this negative sign right here. And when you see a negative sign in front of the variable, you are not done. So this variable, this negative k can actually be rewritten as -1 times k. So actually we still have a step and we need to get k all by itself. So 1 second. I'm gonna pick purple and I'm gonna do step 2. So in order to get k by itself, I'm gonna divide. So I'm gonna undo this multiplication right here by dividing both sides of the equal sign by -1. I'm gonna have k equals 5 divided by -1. So if you were to put that in your calculator, 5 divided by -1, make sure you are practicing putting the negative numbers in your calculator. You should get -5. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start with, get this next one. Oops. Get this next one done. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. So first things first, I'm gonna go ahead and highlight my, whoops, I actually wanna get my constants in yellow. That's just a personal thing. That's not necessary, I suppose. So again, my goal is to get all of my yellows or my constants to the right side. So I want to get that 8a by itself first before I can start getting a by itself. So I need to get rid of that -1. So I can do that. So step 1, I'm going to get rid of this -1 by adding it to both sides. So that's going to cancel. -1 plus 1 cancels. I'm going to rewrite my 8a. So 8a, I'm just bringing down that variable term. 8a equals, now this is a little bit tricky because it's -129 plus 1. When I taught this problem in class, some people, in my in-person class, some people thought that -129 plus 1 was -130. But I want you guys to make sure you're checking, especially with negative numbers, because they can be weird. -129 plus 1 gives us negative 128. So make sure you're being careful. All right. My step 2, I need to get A all by itself. So I know that 8 is being multiplied by A. So 8A is the same thing as 8 times A. So I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 8. That's going to cancel. I'm going to be left with A equals, so in your calculator, take negative 128 divided by 8. You should get negative 16. Alrighty. So, not new share, stop share. All right, so if you guys have questions, you can stick around. If you don't have questions about today's lesson, you can go ahead and log off for the day, but just make sure you're asking questions if you have them, because I don't want you to be lost. I know learning at home is probably a little frustrating and a little bit confusing. So now is the time to ask questions if you have them. But if you don't have questions, you can go ahead and log off.